This week on A to Z Running, we asked the search engine how to run faster. We'll share the top results and our reactions.
In the world of running, NCAA Cross Country Nationals saw multiple rare and amazing achievements.
A new U.S. high school cross-country record was run.
And treadmill running might just become a sanctioned sport.
All this and more on A to Z Running. Welcome back to A to Z Running, where we help runners thrive with information, inspiration, and coaching services. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach. And remember to learn everything you need to know about our services by going to AtoZrunning.com or check us out on the places we share content like Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube, among others. Or say hi to us in person when you see us at races.
Yeah.
Like the recent one.
There's a recent one, Turkey Trot. Many people, if you live in the United States of America, might have run a Turkey Trot. I didn't, but Zach did. He represented our A to Z.
I did that. So you recall, we've been talking for the last couple of weeks about the ongoing plans that I have to run this upcoming track race, which I have mentioned is not likely to happen anymore. So I'll explain that here briefly. But despite that fact, I still wanted to run this Turkey Trot race because, for one, a bunch of our runners whom we are coaching ran it. And so it's always nice to be with them and either cheering or doing the thing with them, whichever is most possible. And then in the same token, it's a huge race. And so it's like when you can run a 5K with 6,000 other people, it's an opportunity to connect with that running community in greater ways. And that, in fact, is the biggest 5K race I have ever run in.
Oh, wow.
Over 6,000 people. I think they actually said like 6,400.
It was record-breaking. I did see that. That was on the news.
Whose record?
It is the event's record.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I also heard that it's the biggest 5K in all of the state of Michigan.
That's possible as well.
That's pretty cool. And yet, the only rationale for the race is that it's on Thanksgiving Day. It's a fascinating thing. But when you have a day, a holiday in particular, where people are likely to travel, and in particular travel for the sake of gathering with family, then it's the kind of thing where like families do the race together. Like you saw a lot of families together doing this, a lot of people doing this with a sister, with a friend, with a brother, all that type of stuff. And so just that many more people gathering. It was cool.
Yeah.
It was exciting. So here's where we're at. I'll tell you about the race first, and then I'll go back to that. So this race in particular was a lot of fun, but as an event, but it was very cold, and that brings new challenges to a race experience. It was under 30 degrees when I showed up, and so I don't personally like running hard in cold temperatures at all. I would avoid it completely if I could, but living in Michigan, there's some inevitability to it. But what it becomes is a unique challenge. And because of the cold, you have to do certain things differently. And so we have mentioned before on the podcast some studies around the effects of being cold. Like if you're cold before you start the race, it still has substantial negative effects on the race, even if you are warming up in the race itself. But so the reality of that line of thinking is you need to do everything you can to make sure you are not cold before the race. And so my strategy is the extreme then. I wear so many layers and like the warmest stuff that I can that I am very uncomfortably hot as I'm getting ready for the race.
That's not good. You are also exaggerating, I'm sure.
Those were very precise words. Very uncomfortably hot is very precise words.
You were hot.
I was sweating a lot.
Oh my word.
And regretting wearing half of the clothes I was wearing, but I had them on, and it was annoying to take them off, and I didn't want to do so until the start because then I would get cold. So that's what I do, though. I do it on purpose. And so I wore too much, and am glad I did because then I wasn't cold. Because you want to stay warm up until the moment when you have to take everything off to start the race. The other side of it is, as well, I wear a lot more during the race, more layers during the race than other people tend to. Part of that is because I am not yet cold adapted. We've talked about that as well on the podcast. So you adapt to warmer temperatures and you adapt to colder temperatures when you're in them enough, like functionally in them, not just occasionally going outside. And I haven't been out in the cold much yet. It hasn't been that cold yet. And so I haven't needed to be. So I knew going into it that the cold was going to be more unpleasant than usual. And it was.
And if you were sweating beforehand, that'd make it worse too.
Well, I had lots of extra clothes with me also.
Okay.
So I could put on drier clothes, and I was very well prepared for the clothing side of things. So I did the whole thing, the warm-up process. The other side of that is you want to make sure that you are very well activated before the race, because you don't want to be like cold and stiff when you're starting. And yet in colder temperature races, people tend to just sit in their car up until the last possible moment because they're cold. They want to stay warm in the car. So at least they're warm sitting in the car. But you need to be moving, and you need to be moving even more than if it's a hot weather race when your muscles are already kind of supple. And so I did an extensive warm up, and I'm glad I did. It just made me that much more hot. I was sweating even more profusely. But got to the start of the race, was able to feel like I wasn't just like frigid and shivering, and chatted with a couple of our athletes at the start line. And it's like they're in their, racing tops and shorts or like compression shorts of something like that. And I'm looking at them thinking, you guys are crazy. And I'm probably wearing like my snowsuit at the time.
Coach, that's on you. You should have like texted and be like, hey, wear more clothes tomorrow.
First of all, I did not know
it's going to be so cold.
Who all was running this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because this is one of those races where people don't generally decide until the last minute. And so that was not something we were exactly privy to. But in the same token, could have probably chatted about it. But even then, I talked with them. Even then, most would have still worn what they were wearing.
I was texting with an athlete who wanted to wear, that does not like to wear running tights to race in. So
sure. Or long sleeves and all the thing. Yeah. So the race goes off, the gun goes off, and I'll spend as little time as possible conveying the experience. It was a fun race, as I said. The race goes off, and a bunch of the young guys jump to the front. Sorry if you're one of those young guys, but when I'm 36 years old, I can call you a young guy if you're in your 20s. I'm allowed to do that now. But these college guys, and some of them just recently graduated, some still in college, were just champing at the bit. They were ready to go. And so they took off at a good aggressive 5K type of thing. And my intent in a 5K in particular is to really just wait and see what everyone else wants to do and then kind of react to it. And so the race gets off at a reasonable clip, and there's a whole bunch of guys jumping up there to the front because this is a 6,000 person race. There's some competitive people in it, which is wonderful. It's what you always hope for. And so we get out to about a mile, and things kind of settle into this pack. And as is my strategy, try to do the thing that you think everyone else least wants you to do in a race. That's always the thing I'm thinking about. And so the thing is, when you're 1 mile into a 5K, the last thing you want to do is surge, especially if you started hard. And so that's when I take off. A mile in, go after it. And sure enough, they didn't seem to want to do that. But props to, is his name Jesse? Props to Jesse, who chased me and made quite the race out of it. And so then it becomes a war of attrition, which in a 5K is not a very long amount of time. And so you have to, the thing you're always doing in your mind when you're running a 5K is reminding yourself that even though it's really uncomfortable, it's going to be over soon. There's not long that you have to be that uncomfortable relative to, of course, other things. And so if the 5K is the first race you've ever run, yeah, it's probably going to feel really long. But if you just came from longer distances and you're doing a 5K, it feels fairly short. So we get we get through the second mile and roughly the same situation. And I just tried to hold them off, and I was able to just kind of keep. It wasn't a big gap, but just kind of keep that gap, and took the race. So
congrats, good job, way to go.
Thanks. So the sad part about it, the unfortunate reality, which is unofficially confirmed, is that the race course was short. And so we get done, we're chatting with a number of our athletes, and a number of athletes ran personal best times. A lot of people, not our athletes specifically, a lot of people ran personal best times. And the tragedy of it is, because you don't know exactly how short the course was unless you went out and remeasured it with a precise measuring tool, like one of those wheels or something, then you don't know exactly what the conversion would be. I would guesstimate it was about 100 meters short based on all these data that I've put together from other people and from my own attempts to measure it in other ways. And so if that's the case, it's really unfortunate because your time is only kind of asterisked. It would have been a personal best, but we don't know exactly what the time was because we're short. So bummer on that, but it was still fun.
I'm glad you had fun.
And it was cold.
Because it was cold, the boys and I didn't go cheer.
Yeah.
But we had a nice day celebrating Thanksgiving with family thereafter.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, as mentioned, we are calling it quits for the season now and going to both of us work on trying to build up some strength and work on our weaknesses such as they are right now. And that's what winter's for in Michigan anyway. So we're going to do that. You won't be hearing about any race results in the near future, but we will still be sharing what
our race results. But there will be plenty for World of Running and our athletes too.
Well, but I mean, what else matters except for our athletes and us? All right. Just kidding. We've got a lot of fun stuff to be talking about instead right now. So let's go ahead and start with our conversation about how to run faster.
Thanks for joining us on this series where we ask the internet basic questions that you might ask. The fundamental questions that people wonder about running, and then we react to them. We let you know what the queries yield as well. So we're going to be today doing the query of how to run faster.
We kind of saved this one for late in our series because it's like the archetypical question. Like what's the one thing every runner wants to be able to do in some level, in some sense? I would love to be faster, right? It's just like this underscoring desire of every runner. And so then the question becomes, if this is in one sense, at least, the most important question that runners wonder, what do the interwebs have to tell us about them? And so we kind of have been working up toward it.
It's interesting because with this query, there's like a lot of content that surrounds this question. So how to run faster without running longer, without getting tired, with less effort, with lower heart rate, etc. So there's like a lot of content that like goes with that people are wondering. So this is an interesting topic because it has a lot of dynamics to it.
Yeah, and what it's the idea that we seem to glean as, so this is one of those things, if you start typing in and like the thing wants to predict the rest of your sentence, right, then it like autofills it with a lot of that. But also if you just search how to run faster and then click through a few pages, don't just look for the top results, most of the headlines are how to run faster with some caveat, as Andy said. And all the caveats have essentially one thing in common, which is how to run faster with less work. It's like that's the idea.
Except we had like the epitome of that. We have one of our most popular episodes on the podcast, by the way, is titled How to Run Faster Without Trying Harder. And it was a conversation with Dave Hodgkinson.
It's one of our first interviews
but it
ever.
It like did really super well.
It did. And then we actually re-released the interview earlier this year in 2024, in March of 2024. Look for the episode that's just titled How to Run Faster with Dave Hodgkinson. And the reason we re-released the interview is because we've been talking about it to individuals, to people so often that we thought it's probably worth just bringing it back to our audience's attention again.
And the idea of our episode was that mechanics matter, and doing things to prepare your body to run well, to practice running, as we've been enjoying saying, practice running better, is going to allow for you to run faster without increasing the effort.
So, yeah, what this becomes, these clickbaits are essentially one of two things in a general sense, at least. The one is kind of similar to what we did with ours, is that We're trying to give you one thing that you can influence easily. It's accessible to every runner that can have a positive effect. And so it's not a question of doing all the other things or not doing all the other things. You're doing all the things, but this is one area that runners tend to neglect that's going to make a big difference. And we wanted to target that, and we thought, what better way to frame it except in Hodgkinson's own words.
That was a quote.
It was what he said about it. And I was like, oh, that was perfect. Let's make the episode titled that. You can run faster without trying harder is essentially what he said. And so then you have the other side, though. And the other side is what concerns me, which is you have a lot of people out there basically saying you don't have to do all the things. Mm-hmm. If you just do these shortcuts, you can get the results you want without doing all the things. And that is a bad kind of recommendation.
It is.
In general. Not to suggest that there isn't a place for some of that, because it's like, well, if you don't have all the time in the world, if you're not able to do the training in the way that's like ideal, but you still want to do something that can help you, then try these things. Like, I understand that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, shortcuts are not our game.
No.
And so if you listen to the AtoZrunning podcast and you're looking for, but I don't want to do all the extra work and I don't want to do all that, we don't tend to offer that perspective as much.
But we do give you the fast wins like we did.
We give you good ideas that can help anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. We try to have some good takeaways, and we will today too. And how we do this is we talk through the top results that we found when we searched the query. So we're going to go through all of those and find out what the internet said about it. Yep.
So here we go. First, we used the Google search engine, as we usually do when we start. And that's mostly because most of you are probably using the Google search engine. And so we want to try to mirror the experience you would have if you searched this. And the first thing that comes up now, and not every single time you search something, but almost every single time, is the AI summary of all the things you might find in the interwebs. Why they prioritize some things over others. We've talked about that a little bit in the past. But here's what the AI said, and I just think this is just perfect. and I'm being sarcastic. The AI said, to run faster, focus on improving your running form, incorporating interval training with high-intensity bursts, practicing hill workouts to build leg strength, and adding strength training exercises to target your core and leg muscles, while also ensuring you have proper running shoes and gear that are lightweight and supportive.
Okay.
And the first thing you notice when you see that is that AI doesn't have a clue what it's talking about. It doesn't have an understanding of the things it just shared with you.
It just made a list of all the good stuff.
It just pulled stuff from highly rated by the algorithm sources and said, here's what they say about it. And this is the trouble I have with AI at a conceptual level. AI is great at a technical level. We've talked about this. This is what the general conversation around artificial intelligence is, which, by the way, what this AI here is doing is not actually artificial intelligence. But anyway, we're getting off point. And so what the AI does well is technical things, like how can you build a cabinet in this kind of conditions? And it's going to give you some great technical details. Then what it does very poorly is the conceptual side of things, where the AI does not itself understand things. It finds something and then tries to give you more information about that thing, but it does not know at a sense level about the thing. And so this means that AI can get pretty close to the heart of a thing incidentally, but it doesn't always. When it doesn't, you get things like this. Of course, it is true that if you're wearing heavy stuff and you take it off, you're probably going to run faster. But that's not what I'm looking for as the questioner when I type this question into Google. So thank you, AI. But I think we need to move on to the next people here. Okay. Speaking of, the next thing that came up in this search is something I have only rarely seen, but it's actually something I think is kind of helpful, which instead of giving us the articles right away, the top search results, it gave a categorical summary of the topic and then gave top search results in each category.
Okay.
Which was interesting. This is another element of the way the AI is functioning in Google right now, but I thought it was a little bit more practical. So then what they did is they said, okay, so strength training. is one category that pops up a lot. And so here's a bunch of articles that reference strength training. And another one was like running form and stuff. And so here's a bunch of articles about that. I thought, okay, that's good. The reason I liked it is because it lays out like 12 categories, and that immediately creates a context within which I can understand the topic now that I'm going and reading the articles. So if these domains are areas that might be helpful as I'm trying to learn how to run faster, what do the different articles have to say about them? I thought that was not a bad thing.
Yeah. So what's the number one, Zach?
The number one article, after we got through all the AI stuff, is Reddit.
For number one, it's been like number 2, number 3.
It's usually 3 or 4 so far in our search results, but it was number 1. And it's actually not surprising to me why this question in Reddit came up higher than other posts, because it had a ton of interaction.
Okay.
Lots. And if you're familiar with Reddit discussion forums, getting upvoted a lot on a post, like on a comment, is going to feed the algorithm well. And this one had multiple comments that had like several hundred upvotes, like many comments had several hundred upvotes. So there were a lot of people interacting with this, not just commenting, but also clicking the thing on the comment. So this question that was posted in Reddit was, if you had to give one tip to a person starting running about how to speed up, what would it be? Thought that was a very strangely worded question, and yet also a really interesting question. And so here are a couple of those suggestions. The top upvoted response had 919 upvotes, which is a lot in Reddit, especially for a subreddit like this one, because it's a very niche subreddit. Top response was, train smarter. Don't be a one-pace runner. Some really easy pace runs, some tempo runs, some track workouts, hills, strength training. Variety is key. I saw that and I thought, that should not be the number one upvoted response, because basically all this person is saying is do lots of things that are good.
But the thing is like, I do think that is an appropriate response in some ways, in some regards, because someone's looking for one tip.
But that wasn't one tip.
But I know, but that person is almost like saying like, well, dude, you got to actually train.
Yeah.
That's, so, I mean, I kind of appreciate saying just got to train. You got to train to be fast.
Right. But also what this is this is the classic comment section response to things, where it's like this semi-cynical, slightly sarcastic, like, well, duh, here's what you do. and every time I see these responses, I think, this is not very helpful. I appreciate that it frames the idea precisely and simply, but it is not very helpful. It also didn't really answer the person's question. If you had to give me one tip, and then he just says, do all the things. So then the questioner should, in response to this question, say, yeah, but which one is like the first best one? Because I asked for one tip. Anyway, classic Reddit response. And then the very next comment.
Could be worse, though.
It could be, yeah.
Well, it might get worse.
Well,
here.
no, because
it gets worse.
It kind of does. But also, because of the way the Reddit forums work and the moderation, the really just rubbish responses end up diminishing into nothingness.
Okay.
Because you get more and more responses that get upvoted. Anyway, so it depends. Not always. The very next comment, though, was the exact opposite kind of post. And I told you before, there's basically 2 kinds of Reddit posts. There's the first one, which I just said, which is not helpful and is kind of sarcastic. And then there's the second one, which is like, this person should have just written a book about what they just put there. And that's what this next one was, which I think is just perfect that they were the top 2 comments that show up. And so the next one gave 2, even though the person asked for 1, they gave 2. And they're very specific, and they are not at all these mainstream, like, bulk ideas. And the 2 were arm swing and look up. Like,
so arm swing, I'm not on board with, but I am all about looking up. I am all about that. I think it does make you immediately improve as a runner. If you are looking down on a regular basis and you change one thing, one tip, and you start looking up, you will run faster.
So you're talking about like look straight up toward the sky?
No, I'm talking about look up above the horizon, keep your eyes up and not down. It seriously will change things for you. I'm very adamant about this tip.
Yes, you are.
I think that it helps runners all the time. Helps me a lot.
Didn't you have like this? You had this whole thing about ponytails. Before we started AtoZrunning, you wanted to start a thing.
Yeah. Phantom ponytail, yeah.
Oh, you shouldn't give that away. People might steal your idea.
Well, it's mine. I already have it published online. So
okay.
No, don't go and look it up. It's not.
But
well
that whole concept was.
Yeah, it's like the ponytail. You're chasing after this ponytail. But there's a lot that went into it for me personally. But just in the sense of like imagining, if you don't have someone in front of you, imagining the ponytail in front of you and chasing after it. So,
I have never chased after a ponytail.
You probably have, actually. You probably have. And some man buns.
No, though, I don't think I have. I'm being literal. I can't think of an instance where I've chased after someone who had bobbing hair.
Oh, well.
In any sense. But anyway.
That's beside the point to what I'm saying.
Not relevant, sorry.
Imagine a head in front of you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're a ponytail or not.
Well, that is very specific suggestions.
It is, but I'm on board. But the arm swing, not so much.
Well, and what the poster was essentially trying to say is like, don't have crazy arms. Like just have comfortable, natural arms, and they explained what those should be. And I just think like if you're going to respond to this question and take a lot of time because it was a lot, it was
really
very
lengthy.
Well articulated.
Oh, interesting.
And I think if you're going to do that, maybe focusing on something that's a little bit more likely to produce positive results. Like the arm swing thing can help, but if it does help, it's only ever going to help a tiny bit. And even then, it's probably not going to make a difference for most people.
But the eyes up thing can.
There are certain
Changes
things.
Your entire posture.
Yes, there are certain things. And I should mention, there are a couple things with your arms that can help. And so if you do, in fact, have an arm swing that is inefficient in any sense, one simple exercise done daily for 3 or 4 weeks is going to help you. And we're not going to tell you what it is right now.
Oh, that's mean.
Teased. Consider yourself teased. We'll do that sometime. Again, we've talked about it before. All right. And then I just wanted to mention the third top-rated comment on this forum was, don't imagine that a trend you see in a matter of days or weeks tells you anything about progress or is sustainable. Real performance improvement is hard won over the course of months and years. In shorter time frames, you are mostly seeing the variation of effort, fatigue, and conditions. So he didn't even answer the question.
That was way more cynical than the first one.
This is how I feel like I want to respond a lot of times in comment sections, which is like he goes right to the heart of things, like stop looking for shortcuts and just do the hard work over time. But I think it's hilarious because you get all the types of responses in the first 3 posts here.
It's funny.
And so this person won't answer the question. I refuse is the answer here.
I will not.
And essentially says stop asking stupid questions. Not a very nice commenter, but at the same time, we do agree with the sentiment that this poster shared. Okay, that's funny. All right, so on that note, I guess Reddit is the thing people are most likely going to go to answer this question. Please don't, because you're going to
We should start posting on Reddit. Make an impact.
I think that's healthy. Okay, after the Reddit article, the next thing on the Google search was other suggested questions. So again, we have taken a long time before we've gotten to actual natural content that people have posted online, which is a little bit troubling to me because by this point, most people are not continuing to scroll and click.
Okay.
So they've stopped at Reddit. That's not encouraging. All right. So the suggested other questions included things like, give me a shortcut to my goal. Show me how to do this with as little work as possible.
What? Are you for real?
I'm not kidding.
These are suggestions?
These are the suggested other questions. And basically how they're framing this is these are the other questions people are sometimes typing related to this one. And it's just like, I'm seeing this and I'm like, no, you're leading us further and further astray. And we haven't even gotten to a good response yet. We haven't even gotten there and all the stuff. Okay. So next article after that, if you even made it this far, is Very Well Fit, which once again is a good resource in a general sense, but they tend to be focused differently than most runners are focused when they're asking these kinds of questions. And so then the question becomes how they do with this one. And of course, the very first thing they say is there are many ways to build endurance and learn how to run faster without getting tired. And I think, oh no, are they just
don't you need stress
I
to
know,
adapt?
I know.
So it's like
they're basically
need
doing
to
the
have a
thing.
stimulus. So then so you're minimizing the stimulus to get less fast, but the whole point is to get faster.
Here's the thing though. they said that purely as clickbait because the rest of their post is like just all the stuff that if you did that, it's probably going to make you tired. So it's like, you lied to me in the beginning of the post because you're not at all trying to prove that point. But in any event, what did they do? Well, they did the same thing that the title suggests, 22 expert tips. And so they just gave you tons of different suggestions. So test out a quicker pace, which, in layman's terms means run faster. And so how to run faster? Run faster. Thanks. I'm glad we got that out of the way in tip number 1.
But they're kind of, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like there's a little bit of an assumption that people are running the same pace all the time. So it's like, try a new pace, try a quick pace to your pace. You have a pace.
Yeah.
But you should not have a pace.
Right.
According to our methods, we don't have a pace. Like Andy is not a pace that I do every day. It's like, no, I have variety. And depending on the day, my effort yields different results or the terrain or whatever. So this is like kind of saying like test out a quicker pace for you. So I don't know.
It's an odd first tip. And it just is reminiscent of, as soon as I read it, it made me think of the IT person when you're like, hey, I'm having computer troubles. And the first thing they say is, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on? It's like, thanks, man. You're helping me out a lot. So that's what this tip feels like. But in any event, I do think that's an interesting point, Andy, which is there clearly seems to be a kind of assumption in all of these thoughts so far that people are just not running different paces. They're just doing the same thing all the time. And I think fundamentally the question doesn't come from that point. Fundamentally the question comes from, I want to be faster. How do I get faster? And what else do they have to say? Well, they say run more often.
Good. That's a good one.
Sure. Except run more often than what? Because
then you are already.
The people asking this question, well, again, they're assuming the people are only running here and there or less frequently than they could be. That's a dangerous assumption.
That's true, because a lot of people who are invested in wanting to get faster might be people who do it regularly and are people who are trying to like achieve, and that means they're probably running quite a bit. They're probably varying their efforts and all of the things so far. Yeah.
It was interesting. Well, the next one here was work on your form. And I thought, oh, great, this is wonderful. And then they linked to a topic or to an article about their own article about the topic. So they don't actually give you any tips here. Or I guess the one tip they give you is relax your shoulders, which is
that's good to do.
Probably not a bad idea. It's good.
Yeah, it's not a bad one. It's probably not the one I start or end with, but okay.
Well, their article actually it breaks it down better, but they don't actually give you the ideas in this article. They just point to it. And then they reference a study where running technique improves performance, and it's true, and that's great. I'm glad they reference a study because those things are always helpful.
Yeah.
More reading material. And then within the topic of work on your form, they address two things. Well, one, I guess, and it has two parts. And this was a little distressing to me. So they said you should count your strides and then quicken your cadence. Now, what's disappointing is they gave us a study for how running form and technique improves performance, and then they proceeded to give us a way to do that, but they didn't substantiate it. And this, as a technique for improving running performance, has actually been disproven in studies. And so that's disheartening here, because the idea of counting your stride and trying to manually pick up your cadence has actually a net negative effect on energy expenditure. And so it wears you out faster. And what they have found in the studies is that the way to improve your cadence, if that's something you need to improve, is through certain other kinds of things outside of the run that help you the most, like precision drills and certain types of
and activating properly. Because a lot of times and you can interrupt me too, but I believe that a lot of times cadences will get lethargic because something is fatiguing, and usually it's overuse of a certain muscle group because you're not activating all the muscles surrounding it properly. So then it's overusing a muscle group. Therefore, then you end up slowing your cadence down.
Yeah, so it was just an odd particular within the thing here. We appreciate their goal because it is often the case that faster running cadence is very helpful for runners. Very often the case. But the means of doing so, I think, could use some massaging. Finessing. Nice. And then they go on. There's more. They talk about anaerobic threshold. Do that. Which, again, by itself, running anaerobic workouts does not really help your anaerobic threshold much. Your anaerobic threshold exists relative to your aerobic capacity. So if you're not doing substantial work to influence your aerobic capacity, the anaerobic stuff has only a minimal effect.
We talk about that quite a bit on the podcast because it is really important for runners to realize that we want to raise our aerobic ceiling so that we even have that top percent to deal with later on, or to have access to it. You don't have access unless you have a good aerobic base.
Yeah, and fundamentally, we have found, as we've looked into this topic quite a bit, that anaerobic training is almost never happening at a regular runner level. Like, really high performance runners are certainly doing things that are direct anaerobic training, but what you have to do to yourself and how it feels to really train your anaerobic system directly, not just as a result of aerobic work, is it's not very comfortable. It's quite difficult to do, like challenging physiologically.
So would you say that you'd be running at more of an effort? I'm just referencing that first line about running with less
just
effort.
run. Well, no, they said without getting tired.
Oh, without getting tired.
Yeah.
Do you think you'd get tired?
You would get tired, yeah. But then it becomes this question about just like, okay, so Dr. Keith Livingstone is a great source on this stuff because he was looking into this in a way that like nobody else was back in the 80s, and publishing work that was very helpful, and still to this day is very helpful if people would know about it and read it. But what he's essentially saying is he's talking about how the emphasis on aerobic systems is always the more important thing for any distance, because the better your aerobic systems, the higher your anaerobic capacity becomes, because it's relative to your aerobic capacity. And so then the question of training within the anaerobic region is not about developing your VO2 max, for instance, or your lactate threshold or any of those types of things, but about developing your tolerance for lactate training, essentially. And so, or rather, you could say developing your tolerance for the byproducts that result of anaerobic training. Because fundamentally, you don't need to train that system. That system is always there within your aerobic potential, or as a piece of. So anyway, there's a lot to be said about it. A lot of people have written and studied it extensively, and there's more nuance than what I was just describing. But that's where we get into this question of if you're telling a runner, how do I get faster? And you're saying develop your anaerobic threshold, but what does that actually mean, and how do I do that? So what essentially it is like your anaerobic threshold is just work on the aerobic stuff because it improves your anaerobic threshold. But there's not a lot here that points you in that direction.
So back to the article, Zach.
Okay. Eating habits. That's one of their next tips, which I think actually makes sense when you look into how they described it, because they say, well, you need carbs when you're trying to run faster, because that's the fuel your body is most likely to use, which is true. With anyone who's not fat adapted, their body is using carbs for energy when you're trying to do things at higher efforts. So, okay, I think that I'm not totally concerned that that's one of the tips here, except that it doesn't necessarily make you faster, but you're probably going to feel better when you're running faster if you have the right fuel. And then also run on a treadmill. They keep doing this. This source keeps bringing up treadmill running as a tip in all of their articles we've seen so far. And I must assume that they're just trying to make sure that people know it's okay to run on a treadmill. But it's also not particularly helpful to running faster.
So,
specifically.
Okay. This is a thing. This is a warning that I give a lot. Sorry, guys. You've heard me say this before, but I can run pretty fast on a treadmill.
And it's not
for
healthy.
a long duration. And I would not suggest that because you can get injured and it's really sad.
We are going to talk about treadmill
there.
running in the world of running. You be excited.
Okay.
Because it's becoming a thing beyond just
So are
running
you
on
saying I might have a skill that's usable?
No.
If I didn't get injured
No.
on it?
We'll see. We got to stick around for the world of running to hear all about it. The next one. So remember how the AI said just wear lightweight running gear? Well, guess where that came from?
Oh, it was mining.
Right here. Very Well Fit says wear lightweight running gear. Because, if you want to run faster, just take off something heavy. I don't even know. Like this makes me wonder. Chicken and egg situation here. Is it possible that AI wrote this article, and AIs think alike? Because I don't think. Would a human think to themselves in this situation? People are trying to figure out how to run faster. What tips should I give them? Let's make sure that we tell them to not wear heavy stuff. I just don't. I feel like that goes without saying, but okay, we're just going to have to move on. They talk about sleep. They talk about cross training, run with a group, which I don't think is a path to running faster in a direct sense, but it is helpful. And so, yeah, it is true. If you want to run faster, both for the motivation of, and because social running is, according to the research, a way to improve performance. That's why they have found across the board that races with other people versus solo races where you submit like virtual results are always higher performance net results. Anyway, okay, I think that's about right.
Oh, finish strong.
Oh yeah.
Like pick it up in the end.
Yeah.
Which,
so it goes back to the first tip actually.
Like the how, but how do you? So that's like not answering how. But
yes, Andy.
Okay.
You run faster by
picking it up. Come on, just do it
faster.
Just run faster.
This just brings us back to in a situation like this, you can find some helpful information.
Yeah, there's good stuff in there.
Absolutely. But what you're getting from this source is not a compact, here's the thing you need to do that's going to get you there. It's more like here's a whole bunch of ideas and just kind of sift through them and see if something there is going to help. Mm-hmm. And that personally is not the way I like to approach these kinds of things, but I also understand why they do this, because they're really just trying to throw out all the information that might be related to your question and let you decide. Just not the way I think, I guess. But there are more things here that are helpful. And
let's keep it going.
We're going to just share a couple final thoughts because we've only actually gotten to 2 different articles still because the AI has been so prevalent in this particular search. They had a bunch of videos next, which again is more just pulling more resources. And one of them was James Dunn on YouTube. He's a science guy. He said how to run faster without getting tired. The science.
I'm baited by that. The science.
Well, I clicked on
science.
But I feel like I clicked on it out of duty.
Okay, well, continue on.
And he just said his basic thing was polarized training. Do some easy and some hard. He mentioned the 80-20 rule. Just increase some of the high effort sessions. Yeah. He gave some examples, interval, thresholds, progressive, fast finish. I really am not happy that he talked about progressive and fast finish because that's just not something I enjoy people talking about so much. We're actually going to get into that here in a moment. But he had a bunch of like specific questions that people had been submitting that he was addressing along the way, which I thought was really helpful. It was because it was giving specific context.
I mean, that's what we've been trying to do. So submit your questions, guys.
Sure, yeah. Ask questions because we use those within these kinds of thoughts too. He answered a question about the difficulty hitting target race pace. And I thought this was great. His first reaction was, it's possible that your target race pace is wrong. I was like, oh, that's so true. That's so true. I'm having a really hard time running my target race pace in training. Well, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe that's the wrong pace. And more to the point, from our perspective, stop trying to run a pace and then you won't have any problem with it at all. But his point was, it's possible that if you're having a hard time that you need to adjust that target race pace, at least for now. And so compliments to him for addressing the thing directly. So just a quick note about the progressive fast finish stuff, because it's come up now a couple of times, and we haven't necessarily addressed it as thoroughly as we probably ought to, which is our reaction constantly to that is a little bit of like and the reason why is because it is, as a hard effort type, one, it is used poorly. It is misused by runners a lot, meaning runners tend to do that when they shouldn't.
He's talking about fast finishes.
Fast
right now.
finish or progressive workout types, where you're just increasing the speed across the workout or increasing the speed in the late stages. And so the reason I say that is because as a workout type, usually people are doing that on days when they should be running easy. And here's the example. Think about net contribution. If you have a Friday, Saturday, where Friday you're going to run, Saturday you're going to run, Saturday you're going to do your long run for the week. And on Friday you run easy, and then Saturday you do a long run that's fast finish, progressive. Positive physiological contribution. Sure, certainly. But if you could instead on Friday run an hour of steady running and on Saturday do an easy long run, you are getting far more training stimulus value from the combination of those two runs than the alternative, and your recovery time is less, quite a bit less. So that Saturday run, if you just do it easy, you could run longer and recover faster than if you did a progressive or a fast finish, and you're getting more value, training stimulus-wise, physiological stimulus from that combination. So what it becomes is it's an efficiency thing. Progressive runs or fast finish runs, either or both and, are highly inefficient fitness building workouts. They can certainly help you, but they are not as efficient and they're not going to give you as much as other things.
The other word of warning with that is when you're not ready to run fast, like let's say that you have not developed your musculoskeletal for going long distances.
Or your aerobic system,
especially. When you try to do a fast finish, you're probably going to run improperly and you could possibly get injured. So this is what happens. You start fatiguing. Let's say throughout the run, you're not lifting your knees as much. You're not lifting your heels as much because something's fatiguing. You start noticing that you're kind of shuffling along when you're like, I really want to finish out this run strong. And you're not firing properly. And then you're like overusing something and you end up injuring it. There's just
even if you don't get injured, the reality of doing that is that it takes way more now time to recover from that and to recover fully. And so, yes, you're likely putting yourself in a vulnerable state.
No. Yeah. I have a couple more thoughts about this whole. Are we
nope,
to final thoughts?
Okay. Final thoughts? No.
Okay, let's continue then.
We have one last, because we wanted to at least get to a third article or a third link to click on. Believe it or not, we're only to the third link of all the stuff. Because it was an article by Runna, which is a coaching platform, if I recall. Yes, and so they have an article here, How to Run Faster and Longer. Top 20 tips for every runner. And at first it's like, it's more clickbaity stuff. But then when I actually got into the article, I was like, oh, no, actually, this is not more clickbaity stuff. These are people who are a little bit more systematic and deliberate, and you can see that they have spent some time with this stuff in a active application way. And so the first thing I noticed, because I clicked their About page, because I was like, I've never heard of this before. The coaches on this platform are people like Beth Porter, who is the Olympian from Great Britain who set the British road 5K record and stuff. I know who she is. Yeah. And Colleen Quigley, who is she an Olympian?
She's an Olympian. Yes,
Olympic steeplechaser. And I'm like, okay, so they apparently have like famous athletes working with their athletes, which is crazy.
This is not an ad for them, by the way.
No, but what it told me is the standard now is higher for what they're about to post here, because you're talking about these people should really know their stuff. If they're saying, they're coaching you with Olympic runners who are some of the best ever in the world. And so I gleaned from the article that they really seem to know their stuff. Not necessarily that I agree with like every word that they've said, but what the first thing they do is they say, okay, if you're beginning, there is a certain place you need to start. And the place is you need to build volume. You need to just focus on developing distance first, because you need your body to get used to running before you start doing all this other stuff. And I'm like, thank you for doing that, because so many people are going in and saying you should start doing hill workouts and you should start doing, and it's like, if you are new to this thing, don't do all that extreme stuff. Just get out there and run and get used to running. And they explain why. They say essentially because, one, your aerobic energy system is what drives everything else, so you need to build that up first. Thank you. I'm so glad you said that. But then two, they say because as you run, your body will get more familiar with the movements and the motions and better and more efficient at them, which is also true. So the musculoskeletal development, the neuromuscular development, all that. So they're basically saying, like, establish a foundation and then move on to these things. I'm like, oh, this is cool. So they have their top 6 tips. Focus on form. Now here's one where I would slightly deviate in my recommendation personally, but they say focus on form while you run. I don't think it's terribly helpful to focus on it while you run. It's actually really, really hard, judging by the many studies done on this. It's really hard for a runner to improve their running form while they're running. Like, even if they do something that seems to look a little bit better, it doesn't create lasting impact. And so don't waste your time, because you're not likely to help it much.
I have had benefit from doing
yes,
it. So.
But that's because you, without knowing it, were doing the other things.
I have always done the other things.
Because you had the coach who knew everything about all of this.
Yes.
And so anyway, Andy had the greatest coach of all time for this kind of stuff. And it's not surprising that she also looks like the best runner ever when she's running.
That's not true.
She just looks so good. Her running mechanic is flawless.
No, don't expect that of me. Now I feel like it's going to be tough.
Oh, goodness, stop. But anyway, the point is that if you want to improve your running form, the best way to do it is with precision drills.
Yes.
Where you focus on the right kind of running movement and repeat it over and over the course of a drill, and then you do that every day. So I mentioned the arms. See, I wasn't teasing that badly. Remember the arms? The person said arm swing in Reddit. Well, this is an example of, if you want to improve your arm swing, don't think about it while you're running. Go stand with your toes up against the wall and your nose basically up against the wall, and then step back like 2 inches. So you're very, very close to the wall. And then put your arms at about midway up your torso. So your hands are right there. And then keep your elbows in the angle there. Keep it the same. Don't drop it. Don't raise it. Just keep it right there. And then what you're doing is now you move your arms back and forth where your fists are almost punching the wall. You don't want to actually punch it because it hurts. Almost punching the wall. Move back and forth, focusing on pushing your elbows back with your arm swing. Do that every day for 2 minutes, and you will have better arms.
Wow.
That's it. That's the kind of thing.
I actually have never done that.
That's a Jay DeSherry drill. That's
okay.
A Jay DeSherry drill.
I haven't done it. Sorry, Jay.
That's because your arms are already amazing. And so that's an example of, if you want to improve your running form, you find those types of things, and that's going to improve your form. All right, now beyond that, they say all the stuff that is just all the good stuff. Run faster, workout types, and they give you some examples. Run hills. I don't know why they cite Brad Hudson here, except that he's a famous coach. But hills have been a top recommendation of running coaches since like the 1930s. And so yes, hills help you run faster because they build your leg strength, and they allow you to work harder, like higher levels of effort, without over stressing things. So you can
your
actually
mechanics too.
Yep, you can actually
Benefits
run
your mechanics a lot.
Yep, good. Okay, and then they talk about lactate threshold, like an aerobic threshold. And once again, I just think that as a strategy, as a tip, that's the result of doing the things you should be doing.
But at least they said what they did in the beginning, so you can forgive them a little bit more.
Yeah, being a little more frequent. They mentioned shoes. That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, thanks. They also talk about breathing, which here, this is like a Jack Daniels thing. Jack Daniels has a whole section in his running formula on breathing, and yet it has consistently been found that that's really just not a place is worth spending much time.
It is outside of running, but while you're actually running, to be super measured in how you're running can often keep you from getting the oxygen you need. So it kind of like we were talking to Todd Buckingham about this because there's like a lot of strategies for running and breathing. However, a lot of times people, if they get too in their head about it, end up restricting how much they're actually able to take in. But there is something that is beneficial about doing breathing patterns, and it is help with relaxing while you're running at high effort. So it can be beneficial for some people, just like I talk about in racing, zooming in and zooming out, for breathing to be something that people zoom in on and having that be something that they're very in tune with, and it becomes a focus to help them relax. So it really depends on the person, in my opinion, but I don't think it's a like base of science. It's more of method and mindset.
Yeah, it's not
That's
a
my
good
opinion.
In that sense. It's not a good general recommendation, but it could be a very helpful thing in specific situations for certain people. So I wouldn't put it as my top 6 tips. I'm not saying these are their top 6, but they are the 6 that they listed. But at the same time, I understand why it's noted here. Okay. There you go. So then they throw in some other things. They have like their extras, the sleep and rest stuff, build muscle, like strength training, and all that good stuff. Okay. Overall thoughts, impressions. Andy, go.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot there. I think it's pretty much everything we hear about training anyway. So that was kind of interesting that it's not really diversified too much when asked a specific question in the query. I do want to share a personal experience about running faster, and that is exactly what we were talking about with having a high aerobic condition, because my fastest I've ever run for my mile was during conditioning for marathoning, which leads me to believe that it's not about a special magic secret sauce workout, but more about having the fitness to run fast. So I really appreciated that last article that said that really what you need is a strong aerobic condition. So, because I truly believe that. But then in addition to that, before I did run that, I had in my routine to do drills and I was doing fartleks and things of that nature. So I was working on developing that neuromuscular. So that's my personal experience with running faster, because we want to also reflect on what we might say to someone who asks us, how can I run faster?
And I guess the principal point of all of these comments around like threshold, you just hear so much conversation around anaerobic threshold, because the higher your threshold or the higher your VO2 max, the faster you're going to be, all that kind of stuff. And it's like we seem to have this warped sense of the value of this line that we keep calling threshold. And it's like you got to get right there, because the closer you are to the line, the more you're stimulating it and adapting. And that's just not really true, because fundamentally, physiologically, any kind of building of aerobic capacity is influencing your anaerobic threshold, your lactate threshold. And you don't have to spend a large amount of time at efforts close to that line, which, by the way, is not a line. It's a zone, and it's actually huge. It's a very large zone. And so don't think of it like this precise point, because that's another thing. People start talking about threshold pace, and it's like, oh my goodness, there is no such thing as threshold pace. Not for an individual athlete even. Not just in general, but not for an individual athlete.
Not even for Jakob Ingebrigtsen. He takes his little blood thing.
Right? So like that should be telling to you, right, that the Ingebrigtsen method, the Norwegian method, is based on testing your lactate levels throughout the workout, because it's one thing one day and it's another thing another day. And the very idea within like what has spurred on this huge trend is that it is not a specific pace. And yet people will still say things like threshold pace. Oh, that's like a knife. That hurts. But anyway, the point is that you can do certain things that are not flashy. They're not like the hot topic thing, but they're going to have a great effect on the stuff that produces this desired result. And so if your question is, how do I run faster? The first answer to that is just build your foundation better. And
it's
there's lots of things.
multifaceted.
Yes.
So I do think that going back to our conversation about how to run faster, starting to do those drills and wiring correctly. So that would be a great place to start in addition to building that foundation. And they work great in tandem because when you're doing low effort running at the beginning of a building season, it's a great time to take on a new routine because it's not like your training isn't going to be so much of a stimulus that you feel like you don't have the bandwidth to add a new routine. So that's our recommendation, right?
Yeah. I mean,
do drills.
It's a three-part thing, right? It's a three-part thing. It is the building your foundation better, your aerobic capacity, and just work on that and have that be the primary emphasis of the time you're spending running. Secondly is make sure your body can move well, and that's the precision drills. That's the type of stuff that helps teach your body how to move efficiently, because you can run a ton of running in a week, but if you're moving very inefficiently, there's only so much you can get out of that running. You get that much more out of it. And then the third thing is then neuromuscular diversity to help stimulate different uses of your muscles while you're running.
We love fartleks.
Yeah, fartleks and other types of higher effort, certainly. And so, like, all these people said, like, just run faster. Well, that's what they're saying, but they're not telling you why that's helping you run faster. It's helping you run faster not because you're getting so much fitter by doing intervals, not because hill workouts are just so much better for your leg strength. They're helping you run faster because of the neuromuscular diversity. And so then where people go wrong is they say, oh, well, I'll do these intervals that are essentially at this kind of threshold range of effort, and I'll do this tempo run, which is essentially at this kind of threshold range of effort, and it turns out you're actually just running all the same kind of thing. And so instead, learn what it means to actually run across all the different ranges of effort, and then do that in a way, like in a fartlek workout, where you can achieve variety to stimulate those things on a regular basis, once a week or something.
That Reddit guy said variety, so yay.
Hey, we as we always say, we're not doing this because we're trying to like say how all of these people are like so wrong. We're trying to figure out what you're going to find when you go to the interwebs with this stuff. And then the question becomes, is that helping me get to the heart of the thing I want? And if it's not, what are some thoughts to consider? And if it is, where do I spend my time?
If you're like, Zach and Andy, what are running drills? What are you even talking about? We do, because a lot of you are new to the show, and so you might not know what we're talking about. And we have drills that we do to awaken our muscles, also train our muscles in proper movement patterns in order to run better.
Pre-run routines, complements of a combination of sources, predominantly Dave Hodgkinson himself. So go to AtoZrunning.com/free, and you can have that, what we just described. And we send it to you in video and PDF form, which people have said to us. They're like, I'm so glad there's a PDF form because I can print that out and I just have it now to leaf through it. It's great.
Awesome.
Well, you get it. But you got to go to AtoZrunning.com/free.
Now, let's move on to the latest news and updates from the world of running.
Before we talk about the rest of the world, let's talk about AtoZ runners, because, as we mentioned, there's a lot of running going on the Turkey Day in the United States. In particular, the one that we ourselves were at, or at least I was.
I was not because it was so cold. I wasn't spectating in the cold. And it wasn't because I wouldn't. It's because I have two kiddos who...
We try to get them to run.
Who didn't want to run in the turkey trot, and I knew that it would be miserable for them in the cold.
However, shout out to one of our particular friends whose two kids did run in the turkey trot.
Aww.
And ran like gobblers all the way, he said. And
That's amazing.
And then stuck around and watched me race afterward too. And that was, you did not have to do that.
That's so nice.
And your family was very gracious. All right. Grand Rapids turkey trot.
Who was that friend? You should shout out that friend. Who was that friend?
J-Mo.
Oh.
All right. Grand Rapids turkey trot. We had some serious amounts of runners in this one, and some shout outs to give. Zach, not me, but our athlete Zach, was first in his age group.
Woohoo.
Just smashing, wonderful. And I think this is 2 weeks after a marathon that he just ran, or maybe 3. He's just been doing it all. Mike was second in his age group, and CJ was third in his age group, and Aaron was first in her age group. So lots of great performances going on here. And in addition, we have Kyle ran, Ben ran, Andrew, Alyssa, and Craig all ran in various different instances of various different things. I think Alyssa ran with a family member. Craig ran in the middle of a 2-hour run. He just said,
What a guy.
He's like, I'm going to just do part of my long run in the turkey trot.
That's
and
cool.
I thought, oh, that's a great idea. And then in other places, at the 30A 10K, 5K, Paul, it's the name of the event is the 30A 10K,
Okay.
but he ran the 5K distance.
I got you.
Paul was first overall.
What?
Won it.
Way to go, Paul.
Took the victory. Awesome. And then at the Gobble Wobble, the kids' food basket, Gobble Wobble, because there's a bunch of Gobble Wobbles I found out, Dan ran. And they don't post official results online. I'm pretty sure he was first in his age group.
Yeah.
So well done, everybody.
Well done. And many of them ran super fast as well. But Zach had mentioned in PRs. But because of the nature of the course, it's like how much of a PR, we're not really sure.
The course was short. We don't know exact official things, but certainly props to those who
Ran fast.
do know that they would have run a PR even if the course was short because they ran so fast. It's amazing. All right. NCAA cross country. Let's pivot here.
All right. This is exciting.
So on the women's race, start there. 2 different layers in cross country. You have the individual and you have the team races. They're happening at once, which is it's one of those kind of fun events because you actually have legitimate team competition going on that matters to people. It's one of the only times that happens in running, and it's really exciting. So on the individual side of things, you basically had this kind of like head-to-head-to-head scenario with these 3 women who one of the 3 of them was almost definitely going to win this race, but no one really knew for sure which one. It was kind of an interesting, like you had, what's her name? I almost said her sister's name. You have Pamela Koske, who is the sister of Bridget Koske, the once world record holder in the marathon. And Pamela Koske is a freshman. She's new in the NCAA this year after taking bronze in the World U20 cross country last year.
That's
Kenyan.
big. I'm putting that out there. That's
huge.
big because globally there's a lot of strong contenders in cross country.
Well, and the East Africans just own global cross country currently. They are just amazing. In the cross country events. And in particular, Koske is Kenyan, and she has performed well historically in cross country. So even though this is her first season in the NCAA, everyone was like, she's got a legit chance at winning this. She set the course record at the pre-nationals race. So like already everyone's like, okay, she's going to be out there. But then you have from Alabama, Doris Lemngol, who also was a favorite, having finished second last year and before joining the NCAA came in with a 14:40 5K personal best.
Wait, before coming in, that means
yes.
When did she do that?
Well, I don't know exactly how old she is. She's Kenyan.
Oh, okay.
So she didn't start
Before
the
coming in,
NCAA
'cause I
as
was
like
like-
an 18-year-old, but
Yeah, a high schooler running 14:40 would be out of this world.
not for a Kenyan.
That's
But
crazy
it would,
fast.
but it would for an American. We'll get to that in a moment. But anyway, so Lemngol was definitely a favorite from Alabama, and then you had her previous teammate, who's now running for Florida, Hilda Olamomoy, who was also a likely favorite, having now the experience that the others don't, because Olamomoy was in her final cross country season, I think.
Okay.
And so between the 3 of them, it was, who knows? And
Collegiate. She might continue on.
Yeah, well, that's right. Ended up being Lemngol took the win. Pretty strong separation. And so she won the race, not necessarily a surprise, but at the same time, being able to dominate like she did over the last 800 or so, last half mile. It's pretty impressive stuff. So there you go. And runner-up was Pamela Koske.
Okay.
Then on the team side for the women, BYU. Okay, well, I just gave it away, but I should back up. No one really knew who was going to be able to win this race as a team.
No, the women's side was up in the air.
Very much up in the air. Like the early season favorites, NAU, were not performing stellar throughout the season, and so then they looked fragile. And then you had a number of other teams that should have been good candidates and yet had injuries and then had bad results. And so it was like, it got to the point where at the NCAA meet, everyone was like, this could be the highest scoring NCAA win in a long time. And in fact, it was.
Okay.
So not only high scoring, but as a team, BYU did not have very many stellar performances, but their group, their depth was such that they were able to take the victory despite many adverse situations. They had one of their, I think their top 3 runners was injured like 2 weeks before the race.
No.
Couldn't run it. You had one of their top runners perform very poorly. So anyway, it was just one of those situations that they came through.
They came through.
BYU women took the win.
Wow, BYU produces amazing runners.
Oh, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. I want to talk about the day of Ed Eyestone, who actually isn't the women's coach, but he is the men's coach. So on the men's side then, we'll talk about it. On the men's side, Graham Blanks, before we get to the team stuff, Graham Blanks from Harvard, NCAA cross-country champ last year, then set the 5K record, which was then broken by Nico Young, but did set it, at least the 5,000-meter record, and then went on to qualify to run in the Olympics, ran in the Paris Olympics for USA. Graham Blanks, repeat victory, and it just didn't surprise anybody.
No.
It's like this dude, Andy said it earlier, what did you say?
I said that he was a man among boys.
At this point, it kind of looks that way.
Well, just because he went to the Olympics, I mean, that has to give you so much confidence. You're in another league, right? If you go to the Olympics, you're in another league, and then you come back to the I don't know. I'm impressed with what he's been able to do this year, but that also puts a lot of pressure on him, and not all runners are able to handle that, especially when they're young, to have expectation like he is the Olympian. Oh, come on, let's do it. And he did.
And he did.
Good on him.
And that, by the way, puts him in rare company. There have only been 3 men in the history of the NCAA to repeat victories in cross country, like back-to-back victories. And check it out. These 3. Jerry Lindgren, we're talking like back in, what was this, the 60s? It was the 60s. Jerry Lindgren, so he's legend. And then Steve Prefontaine. I mean, of all people, right? Not surprising. And then Connor Mance, who most recently did so, but also did so under unique circumstances, because that was that COVID year when they held cross country in the spring one year.
Oh, weird, yeah.
And so he won it in the spring and then came back to win it again in the fall, only about 6 months later. And everyone's like, I don't know if that counts in the same way, because it was like within the same calendar year even.
I don't know, but Connor Mance has shown that he is a force to be reckoned with on the American distance running scene.
But Connor Mance is also a legendary runner. And so there you go. Graham Blanks joins the 3 of them to make the 4th ever to repeat for the men in the national cross-country title. That is something. And then in second place was Habtum Samuel, who you recall ran under 27 minutes in the 10,000 meters last year. Mm-hmm. Would have been a collegiate record, but Nico Young beat him in that race. And so the 2 of them both ran the fastest NCAA 10,000 meters ever. And that's the same Habtum Samuel. He also was runner-up last year. I don't remember what he was last year now off the top of my head. But he finished second after running more than half the race with only 1 shoe and both of his feet gushing blood.
Oh, so bad.
He had to get stitches after the race.
Wow.
And it was for like half the race that was the case. So
what grit.
What
boss. Determination.
Right? And everyone's like, oh, would he have won that race if not for...
I mean, that is a pretty massive obstacle to overcome.
Yeah. But here you go.
Especially when your feet are bleeding.
He also had like just super cool outlook where he was like, it was my day. Like I was so fit coming into this, and just, it was a bummer that happened, but I had to be tough still. And what a guy. All right. So you'll see more of him. That's for sure. But then on the team title side, BYU pulled off the team sweep.
Wow, men too. That's amazing.
Which is the first time in 20 years that it's happened.
2004, Colorado was able to sweep both titles, but it's been since then.
And if you're not familiar with the 2004 Colorado team, we're talking about the Gouchers, right? Both of them. running at the same time. So the women and the men's race influence. You're talking about like Ritz, like the legends, right? That was the Colorado team we're talking about. Anyway, so BYU, what in the world is going on here? First, they the last time that they won, if you recall, was 5 years ago in the midst of all those NAU repeat victories over and over. BYU had upset them, showed up and like dominated. So like they're clearly a team that can get stuff done. But also they did it in an incredible way here where they did not have, what was it? They didn't have anyone in the top like 10, 11 place. I can't remember, but it was like not the common way to victory. Or maybe that's the women. Now that I'm thinking about it, that might have been the women. All right, I'm getting these two confused. But the situation, such as it is, BYU just dominating in the cross-country scene. And that's exciting stuff. Okay. Well, there you go. That's NCAA. Now the season's over. We're going to be talking about track soon because they start the preseason meets.
Track.
We love it.
We love it. And we love cross country, so we're sad to see it done. But
well, it's only done at the NCAA level. Now we get to talk about the high schoolers.
And then it will continue on into December for the world scene.
No, that's March.
Oh, I'm sorry. For the U.S. The U.S. cross country championships are usually, right, in December?
January or February.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm so wrong about this, guys. I'm really sorry. Wow.
This is the problem. Cross country is just this never-ending season, too.
So we're going to swing to fastest cross country 5K that we've seen.
By an American high schooler.
By an American high schooler.
We want to just briefly mention because it is absolutely news.
Supposed to talk about this kind of thing.
Yeah. At the Nike Cross Country Regionals, Jane Hedengren ran 15:50 in a 5K, the fastest ever performance by a high schooler in cross country. And what's even crazier, so that's really fast, but what's even crazier is she won the race by 41 seconds over second place, and in second place is defending Nike Cross champ Addie Ritzenhein. So she just crushed it. And we'll see if that carries over to Nike Cross champs, which you'll be hearing about shortly from us. That'll be exciting. So watch for Hedengren. She's no stranger to running fast times, if you recall, on the track season last year, but more to come.
This is an interesting one because Zach had teased it earlier about treadmills. Why don't you talk about this?
Okay, so apparently, I do not know how serious this really is. Nobody does at the moment. World Athletics has been considering, the governing body of the sport,
Athletics,
has been considering treadmill championships.
I have a problem with this. I do. One is that how do you calibrate them to make sure it's fair? Because not all treadmills are equal.
I mean, you probably have to go to a place, right, and run on a treadmill.
I would hope so, because they should tune them all before everyone starts.
Oh, my goodness, right? So if you're the fourth person to run on that treadmill that day, chances are the grease is just worn down just a little bit more.
It's got to be fair. That's all I got to say about it.
There's no way. This has to be a troll. There's no way. So the Telegraph out of the UK really didn't like this, and they posted an article. They just lit it up. Like the sarcasm was bleeding out of this article, and so they're like, oh, while they're at it, they're basically like, oh, this is a great idea. While they're at it, here's some other suggestions. You know that bleep test, which is what they call it in the UK. We call it the pacer test in the US. You know what that is?
Yes,
you have
loved
to run
the pacer test
to the thing when it beeps, and then you just keep getting faster, faster, faster.
Yes, I
So they were like,
that.
how about a bleep test world championships? Like, yeah, sure.
I would, yeah.
Ultra yoga, see who can hold the yoga pose the longest, or break dancing.
Oh no, they didn't. Too soon.
No, it's not. It's not too soon. All right, so that clearly is not something that people are thrilled that World Athletics has been talking about, and we just don't know for sure if it's serious.
I think it's interesting. When people do crazy things like Mario, who's on our show, I think that is cool. But I don't know about keeping it fair when people are going to be on treadmills.
Not if they're in their own treadmill, in their own. I mean, so we've owned 2 or 3 different treadmills, 3 different treadmills.
This was the
in our
slowest,
lives.
I feel like.
Well, okay, so
But I'm also the
we have
slowest I've
owned
ever
3
been,
different
so.
treadmills in our lives. The running experience on each of those 3 treadmills has been vastly different. Like not even close, vastly different. And that's only 3 different treadmills.
Yeah.
And various different brands, various different qualities. But anyway, all right, one more for you here. Strength.
Are you sure? We should save it for next.
No, we got to
episode.
share it right now.
Oh, okay.
Strength for runners. Brody Sharp, who is the running physio of Run Smarter, shared a video just recently on his YouTube channel that we thought was just great. We got to end on positive note. That's why I'm doing this.
Zach really likes this because it's the stuff we say.
Well, no, it's great because it corroborates a number of the things that we have been seeing. And so he's pointing to some of the studies that we've come across as well that say about strength for runners. First, that there's essentially 2 key takeaways that he has here. First is that strength training does make running faster. It just does. And then second, that certain ways of going about strength training can be substantially more effective than others for runners. And in particular, we're talking about high weight, low rep, and we're talking about functional movement lifts. And so here's where he came up with, I've combed through all this research, is what he says, and I've come up with the best possible exercises that runners should do. And if you don't have time to do 20 exercises, here's 4. If you don't have time for 4, here's 2. And if you only have time to do 1 exercise, here's what it is. That's what his video does. It's great. So he's talking about split squats, which is where you do a 1-legged squat with weight in hand, like dumbbells. Your leg is on a bench behind you, or even better, it's in a sling, like one of those strap slings. Even better. And you do single leg squats like that. He's talking about bent knee calf raises with heavy weight. So again, you're destabilizing yourself slightly. You're working the muscles as they move when you're running. So we talk about functional movement lifting. And he talks about drop jumps, which is because that's what happens every time you step when you're running. You're hitting the ground. You're jumping over and over as you run. So that's good. He talked about plyos in general too. And then he has his golden exercise. If you can only do one thing, at least do weighted lunge walks. Well, that's great. Wonderful. Brody, thanks for the great tips. We love it. Mm-hmm. Go watch his video if you want to. Just look up Run Smarter, Brody Sharp. Find his video on strength training for runners. There you go.
There you go. This is quite the episode. We're thankful for you, in case you wondered.
Oh, because it's Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Oh.
Very thankful for all of you and the journey that we've gone on together. We are excited to bring to you more content in this coming season, and we hope to talk to you next week.